Welcome to Watching Trees Grow, a podcast by Troutwood. I'm Gene Natali, co-founder and CEO of Troutwood. This is our first edition of what we are calling office hours. Today was my first day of the spring semester and marks my 7th year teaching personal finance at the University of Pittsburgh. And one of the themes we talk a lot about, both in my classroom, but also internally at Troutwood, is the classroom is a confined space. It's a confined space on a giant campus. And candidly, there just isn't a way to get every student who should be in that classroom in there. So we want to create a bit of a multiplier effect, share the observations, what we learned in each week's class, and expand our conversation to the broader travel community. I'm going to essentially break down 10 weeks of personal finance curriculum into 10 minutes every Friday. We'll take questions live and address your kind of personal financial needs is maybe the wrong word. Because I think what is really interesting, this class has one goal, that every student who enrolls walks out with a working financial plan. We'll talk a little bit about that and what that means, because that was the question we started class with today. What is a financial plan? We narrowed the answer to that question down to 4 points. It's a plan for my finances that identifies my long-term goals, broken into small steps, and identifies my investments, expenses, and my salary. I thought that was a very concise summary that the class arrived at for what is a financial plan. We then said, why are you here? Why does a financial plan matter to you? What made you, the student, decide to spend your Friday afternoon in this classroom? The questions were very broad to that. Most commonly was, at this point in my life, I've never had this conversation. I'm a college senior, I'm a college junior, and I've never taken a personal finance class. Graduation is getting near, and it's time to have the conversation. Candidly, we get a few of those. I needed one more credit to graduate, and I'm okay. Once we get someone in that classroom, I believe that we have the opportunity to very positively impact that student's life. I will share that it was a high energy first day. My students potentially disagree. Any listening might disagree. I will say I started with a really bad horror movie joke and not a single student laughed. So that one was on me, but we were kind of maybe a little rusty after teaching virtual with COVID last year. In a wild kind of small world we live in, one of my students lives in the neighborhood that I grew up in when I was young. That's the first time that's ever happened in 7 years. But I'm going to share 5 observations from day one, and then we're going to very quickly go through what today's curriculum was, which was navigating the financial arena that all of us live and operate within. And before sharing the 5 observations from day one, I want to preface by saying the first day of class is always difficult. It's an icebreaker class. We're building trust with one another, student to instructor, and you tend not to get a whole lot of engagement or openness from students, particularly compared to later in the semester. Today was fun. Some students opened up more than is typical on a first day of class. By credit, I think that maybe society, the media, for making financial literacy a safer conversation to talk about. I had a student who opened a landscape business and started a Roth IRA. That's pretty cool day one fact. I had a student who was able to share some credit card fears and concerns, as that being the reason that she elected to take the class. That's the first time in 7 years I've had a student tell me on day one they're taking the class because of credit card debt. That's usually a fact that comes out at the midpoint in the semester. I have the smallest number of finance students that I've ever had in the class. Year one, it was 100% finance. It was probably 25%. I say that because on a college campus, it's extremely important we reach the non-business school, non-finance students. I am going to jump to, and for anyone watching on YouTube, you'll see a slide pop up. I'm going to share very quickly what we covered in class, but I'm going to give you the elevator pitch, how we summarize and define the financial arena that each of us operates in. In my past life, I worked with some of the largest institutional investors on the planet. One takeaway from that experience is that 100% of institutional investors have a plan. 100% of individuals shouldn't just demand a plan, they deserve one. In class, we talked about maybe changing this headline from 100% of institutions have a plan and 100% of individuals deserve one to 100% of institutions have a plan, whereas only 1% of individuals do. That's a big gap. And the premise that we took at, we used the University of Pittsburgh's endowment as an example and said, this is an institution that has successfully managed this pool of money for many years. What can we learn and apply as we build these plans over the course of the semester? And if you tune into this series of office hours, I would encourage you to maybe in the back of your mind, consider building a financial plan. And I'll read the quote on this slide. Imagine a world in which every student has not only hope and dreams, but independent of wealth, the zip code they live in, their GPA, college, or career choice, has a financial plan to help chase those dreams. That's a big goal. So part one of the arena is recognizing institutions have a plan, whereas we as individuals do not. The second step in the kind of navigating this financial arena is recognizing that retirement has changed. Historically, in America, we had a pension fund. By we, I mean most workers. That number is statistically, I believe it is 13.6% of all Americans currently have the option of a pension fund. So that's declined in total participation. A pension fund provided income for life. There are 4 primary career types that still offer a pension fund in that income for life post-career. That's our military branches, state, federal, local government, K through 12 education, and the trades, plumbing, electricians, steel workers, etc. I personally believe that the pension fund is the single greatest retirement type ever built. And maybe in a future episode, we can take questions and talk about, why it's become less popular. There are certainly very valid reasons. Prior to today, I had only had 2 students make it through my classroom that did graduate into a pension fund. One was Navy, one was Air Force. We had the best engagement we've ever had on this topic, as almost half a dozen students either had the option of a pension fund or knew a family member or friend who did. So there was great recognition, because stepping back from an understanding that you won't have a pension fund raises a second question. If I'm not going to have a pension fund, who's in charge of securing my finances after I stop working? And the answer is an obvious one. You are. And that's why I think this is such an important pillar in the arena. The third pillar we dove into is recognizing that the algorithms competing for our paycheck make it very difficult to hold on to our paycheck without a plan. And the headline statement is the competition for each of our individual paychecks is extremely intense. Google wants a part, Amazon wants a part, Apple wants a part, Facebook wants a part, Netflix wants a part. So every small business wants a part, and they are strategically competing for that paycheck, which is okay. I joke that I drive a Ford, but Toyota knows that I like to look at the Toyota Tacoma. How do they know that? The algorithms. That's not bad. What's bad is if I try to navigate the competition for this paycheck without a plan. In very simple terms, save first. And in the classroom, we talked about save first, save early. We'll talk a little bit more about that in future office hour segments. Next pillar is what's happening in the investing world, the gamification of real money. The confetti and the fireworks when you get a trade right. The meme stocks from last year. I'll share one observation with our audience. And this is an observation from a few years now of teaching. So much of the media focuses on Robinhood or 1 or 2 big names. When I asked my students today if any had trading accounts, probably a quarter of the class did. There weren't 2 students that used the same investing app. That's how diversified that was. The next pillar, and the one that I personally have the most difficulty with, is social media having given non-experts a platform. It's also given experts a platform. So there's 2 sides to this conversation. And the quote that we gave in class today, just, to help the message stick, is if you take investment advice from your dentist, whose fault is it? And it's the same if you are, getting advice from folks who maybe you haven't vetted or who maybe are good with a camera, but don't have the finance or the investment expertise. It's your money. It's your fault if you take advice from someone who maybe you haven't vetted. We gave 3 examples here to drive this point home because of the potential of losing money if you take bad advice. And this is different. Educating yourself is very different than taking action. But I think that the part that I noticed the greatest interest from the students today was when we talked about message boards. Message boards are areas where you can go and people can chatter about stocks, good investment, bad investment. I'm always a little surprised, but students are surprised that the people on the message boards who claim to be insiders aren't insiders of the company. And I just want to make a very candid point. Employees of publicly traded companies are not allowed legally to go on public message boards and share inside information of future deals. And the half of my class did get a pretty big smile because when you hear that, it is so obvious. So use the social platforms, use the various mediums to inform and to educate yourself, but be very cognizant of whom you choose to take investment advice from. And then we kind of bundle this arena in where kind of just circling back, most of us navigate without a plan. We no longer have a pension fund. There's the battle for our paycheck is getting more and more intense every single day. Investing has been gamified. It's a difficult arena. It's difficult to get questions. And oh, yes, your student loans are due soon. So we don't have a whole lot of time to figure this out. That's how we define the arena. That was the whole premise of today's class. Next week, we'll have a little bit of a different conversation. We're going to actually start physically building plans. So we'll share that with you, with our audience. Think about that earlier statement. 100% of institutions have a plan, whereas so few individuals do. Maybe together we can start to bridge that gap. Thanks for tuning in to this first episode of Office Hours. And I hope that over the course of the next few months that we can share our experiences in the classroom and help each of you start to think about that idea, that concept of having a working financial plan and taking steps to actually implement it. The end.